making sure that you found the right ones and they're doing it for the right reason.
Describe what the growth was from when you entered in marketing to where you took the organization.
I left in January of 2025 of this year, and we had nearly 200, and we were in 9 countries outside of the US.
What relationships mean and what working hard means.
It doesn't really matter what I think, and it doesn't actually matter, Mr. Founder, what you think. It's what your customers want.
What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of not growing.
What is something that you're most proud of?
Getting that feedback from clients that you value their opinion on.
Every business, every company, every person in a leadership position needs help.
Welcome to Leadership Backstage, the podcast that exposes the raw truths behind leadership. We dive deep into blind spots, failures, and bold moves, questioning the myths leaders cling to and challenging you to think differently. Each episode brings unfiltered stories from CEOs, executives, and thought leaders who fought through scaling pains, culture clashes, and high-stakes decisions. This is where courage, clarity, and breakthrough thinking collide, sparking insights that actually matter. Here's your host, Claudia Williams.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Leadership Backstage. We're going behind the curtain with a woman who went from roller coasters to donuts, literally. She went from the marketing department to the office of the CEO, from Fortune 500 to friend and family-owned business, to super franchise, to private equity. She's done it all. It's glamorous, it's exciting, and it's messy. Please welcome Betsy Hamm. Betsy,
My
thank you
goodness,
so
thank
much for
you.
joining me.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. And thanks for making me just kind of like recap my career. You're right. It has been like this kind of up and down and all over the place. So that was
Yeah.
a good reminder.
And you have to be scrappy to go on the journey you've been on. How? Let's start off by how do you go from marketing to running a giant super franchise and riding camels in Dubai?
That's true, right? I did definitely ride camels in Dubai. It's funny, and maybe because I have teenagers in high school, like you think back to when you're that age where you're trying to figure out your career and what do you want to be when you grow up and what do you want to do? And, I think I always kind of had a little bit of a plan, like, oh, I want to be a marketing person. I want to do this. I ended up interning at Hershey. So then I got exposed to like, oh, I love this brand. I want to work here. So it was always a couple steps out ahead. But, I think back, if you would have told me 10 years ago that I would be the CEO of an international donut franchise, I would have laughed at you. Like I would have been like, that doesn't sound like my path. And I think I've always been an average student, like in high school. And then I think in college, I started to realize how I could connect the dots and how important relationships were. And it's just sort of, you don't have to have it figured out like with the 10-year plan. It was more of a your plan or maybe it's 6 months, but along the way just kind of making those decisions where it seemed like the next best step. But a lot of it was scrappy, and especially starting at Hershey, which is a very large company with a lots of resources and structure, and felt like support, and there was pros and cons of that, of course, but then kind of going to the other end of the spectrum where it was a startup company that was pretty unsophisticated and felt very mom and pop. So talk about being scrappy. That was then a whole new level of how do you approach this with limited resources and limited budgets and limited teams and trying to grow a brand.
Yes, and grow a brand you did. And I should say, you are now running your own show. And I can't wait to talk about how you are a strategist, you are focused on growth and now helping other companies do what you did for Duck Donuts. If anyone's ever been to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, we know that's where it started, the OG Duck Donuts. How did you take Duck from entering in the marketing department to going to COO to CEO? How did you take Duck from that small family franchise or small family business to the super franchise all over the world?
Literally. It's funny when somebody had reached out and was like, hey, Duck is opening their corporate headquarters here in Mechanicsburg. They're looking for a marketing person. Are you interested? And I was like, I don't even know what Duck Donuts is. I had never been to the Outer Banks, so I just didn't quite know why I would check it out. But, you should always check out any opportunity that kind of comes your way. So I called 2 of my girlfriends who always went to the Outer Banks, and they were so emphatic about Duck Donuts. They're like, oh my gosh, you have to take this call. You have to go meet with them. Like, it's the best thing ever. And they were so excited. I'm like, why are you so excited about a donut? Like, I just didn't know because I had never been there. So then when I went and met with the founder, Russ, who was the CEO at the time, and he talked about, hey, we have this brand. People who know it love it. Now we just want to make it national. Actually, I don't even know if he said national. I think it was regional, a regional household name. They
Okay.
just had a handful of locations open. So when I started at Duck, it was a lot of the cleanup of branding, right? Like logos and photos and just the basic foundations because it just wasn't there. They were growing so quickly. But you know what was so cool about that brand was being able to keep it real and what made it exciting and what made people love it because of the Outer Banks, but then continue to just grow and scale it. So it was this interesting balance. And the brand wasn't that old, but was kind of funny coming from Hershey, where, you know, the brand was over 100 years old and we were constantly trying to reinvent and evolve the brand. But this was more organic, more organic and more authentic where, you know, let's just continue to make this a national household name. And it was really about staying true to the product and focusing on what made them successful to that point, which was donuts, right? It's really easy to get distracted by the shiny object and do we add this and do we do that and, you know, kind of lose who you are. And don't get me wrong, we had our moments where you did kind of say like, wait, why are we doing this? But, you know, we're not at
Mhm.
retreat, right? Like probably shouldn't eat donuts every day. Like, let's just be honest. So let's just focus on
But
the
we
fact.
can.
I mean, you can, and I still encourage that, of course, but
Yeah, yeah.
you know, let's focus on what we're known for, and that was creating a warm, delicious, made to order donut, and leaning into that, and just utilizing that to grow and continuing to. I mentioned the emotional connection that my friends had with the brand.
Mhm.
Well, that continued to happen as we grew even internationally. And so it was funny to go to Dubai, Egypt, Qatar, and see people speaking a different language, not having any connection to the Outer Banks or anything. But there was just something about this warm donut that was made for you that you got to customize that people just like were so excited about and just wanted to engage around that. And that really helps with the brand growth. It's very genuine and authentic.
And you grew by franchising.
Yes. Yep.
And you talked about how, there were things that are not easy. And people think that you're in this position and they see the travel and it looks like so much fun. It's really difficult to get franchisees aligned that there is a very specific way to make this product. There's a way to run this business, right? Because you bring in people who want to own a business and they think they have better ways and ideas of doing things, right? So how do you get that alignment across hundreds of franchisees?
Yeah, so that was so easy. Just kidding. That is, you know, that's one of the hardest parts, and I don't think people realize the complexities of franchising. So, they're small business owners. These people, whether it's, you know, with Duck or McDonald's, I mean, take your franchise where these people are investing oftentimes their life savings, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars to open a business. And what they're buying from you essentially is the brand and the operation, right? Like, how do I run it? So, you know, we can teach people how to make a donut. We can teach people some of those operational things, but then they have to execute and it's on them to grow their business. And, you know, especially in the earlier days, or actually even, you know, when I was there at the end, it was really like everybody has an opinion. Everybody wants to say, and they're in it, they're living it and breathing it. And so there's a lot of best practices that come from it. However, it has to be consistent. And that's the hard part where, you know, I had those conversations where like, well, this isn't Dave's Donuts. This isn't Bob's Donuts. This is Duck Donuts. And you bought this because of the strength of the brand. So we certainly, you know, sometimes maybe we're too lax. And then COVID was a whole other challenge because our team wasn't out in the locations. But as you're growing, you're not there every day. So all you can do is provide the tools and resources and the structure. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. This is how we operate because we all know as customers when you go into any brand that's say let's say Jersey Mike's, right? Like you
Yep.
expect the same experience. You want the same menu items, you want the same smiles on their face, and you expect to walk out with that same experience. And that's the pros of franchising. People love consistency, they love comfort, they love to know what they're getting. So you have to deliver on that, and it's really hard because obviously when somebody different's running, there's going to be a little bit of different, you know, approaches or takes, but it's streamlining that to be as consistent as possible. And is there differences in markets? Sure, sometimes there's a little bit, but it's really not as extreme as I think sometimes franchisees want to make it. But you
Mhm.
have to deliver that, and you think about, one of the best brands, and they have a very unique franchise model. It's not like everybody else, but Chick-fil-A, right? Like Chick-fil-A is known for their superior products, their exceptional customer experience. I mean, very rarely does anyone ever say they had a bad experience at Chick-fil-A. And that comes down to training and accountability, and their franchise, as I mentioned, their franchise model is a little bit different, but their franchisees are in the store working, 40 plus hours a week, owning it and making sure that they're delivering on those expectations. So it's very hard. And the bigger you get, the more challenging that comes. And then you add international into the mix where, we had somebody who was across the pond essentially, but you're not in those stores every day. So you're monitoring on social media and you're seeing pictures and going, what are you selling? So, it's sort of that piece of like, just you have to be really clear on the expectations and then hold people accountable when you're growing, whether it's a franchise or even if it's a multi-unit business, it's the same thing.
What were some of the messiest parts of
Oh, how long is this podcast?
yeah, yeah. Is it the employee people stuff? Like what?
Honestly, it was the people part, and, I think, again, when I started at Duck, I was employee number 12, it was primarily friends and family, and they were growing so quickly, so I come in with this big corporate background, which people were like, what is why is she so formal? Why is there so much structure?" And I was happy to let go of some of that structure, right? We all know corporate can be a little over structured and complicated, but because we were growing so quickly, the expectations of positions changed so fast. And that was really hard because you could have somebody who was a really good director when you had, let's say, 40, 50 locations, but now you have
Mhm.
150 locations and the problems are different, the structure is different, the how to solve things are different. And so you have this moving target from a position standpoint where, okay, well, you were good enough when we had 50 locations in this role, but you aren't ready to be at that next level to be a director when there's 200 locations. So it was really hard to one stay ahead of that, right? Because sometimes you think you're good, and people talk about milestones like 50, 75, 100. You think you're good and then you kind of hit these milestones and you're like, we don't have the right team member or we don't have the right structure or we need more resources. So it was trying to know when to even add people, position layers at the right time, obviously trying to be financially smart about it from a business standpoint. But it's almost like you kept changing the job description on people, and that's really hard. But the company's growing, so you have to be able to move with that. So that was definitely, I think, the biggest challenges is just trying to grow a team while you're growing the brand and not getting behind, but then also not getting ahead too when you brought people in.
So I see this a lot with organizations, exactly what you're describing, where we have people who are really good at what they do, but what they do changes. And it changes because the organization is changing. Were are people aware of the skill gap? And if they aren't aware of it, how were you able to communicate the gap to them?
That was really tough because you have people who could be doing a really good job today, but you know
Mhm.
that they can't grow to that next level as fast as you need. So, I mean, obviously, even being at Hershey, we didn't scale that quickly. It was a more established brand, right? So you could see growth and you would add, but I mean, most people who worked there never had experienced this rapid growth. So it was kind of defeating when you're like, what do you mean I can't do this? Or the other part of that too is we would bring people in that I thought, okay, we're going to start bringing people in who've been there and done that. And we brought people in from large brands who couldn't get their hands dirty. So it was sort of like you had to have this in between of you need people with the experience and understanding how to grow and scale, but you bring a VP in of somebody who maybe had a team of 50 people. Now, we don't even have 50 people at Duck. It was difficult to make that adjustment. So it was finding people who could scale, but also if they were already scaled, if they already did that and had that experience, can they dial it back and realize, okay, you got a small team. We're scrappy, back to the word scrappy,
Mhm.
limited resources. You're going to have to get your hands dirty. This isn't a position where you're just going to sit back and, you have an admin who's going to do this or you're going to send your team here. Like you're going to have to do it. So it was kind of interesting where you had that at both ends of the spectrum of like, I don't want to say overqualified, but the wrong qualified the wrong qualifications in
Yeah.
order to get the job done. So it was definitely tough on both ends.
Yeah, when people are too used to being able to delegate that they haven't actually been in the weeds. We try to get people out of the weeds in executive leadership, and then when we need them to get back in the weeds because the nature of the work changes, then these are all shifts that are hard to make back and forth. So, can you tell the listeners? We keep talking about the rapid growth. Describe what the growth was from when you entered in marketing to where you took the organization, where you took Doc as CEO.
So when I started, it was September of 2016. We had 20 locations, and I left in January of 2025 of this year, and we had nearly 200, and we were in 9 countries outside of the US. So not only did we deal with the domestic front of growth, but then we went international too.
And the former lawyer in me says there's so much that you have to do and know about operating, not only in different states, but in different countries. My gosh.
Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned the people piece too, which that's the team. The other people piece is the franchisees and, making sure that you found the right ones and they're doing it for the right reasons. So that was also part of the growth of, this isn't a passive investment. And I think a lot of times in the beginning, people saw the lines in the Outer Banks and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like a great business model. I want to bring this to my hometown, which of course is how it got started. But
Mhm.
I mean, owning a franchise, owning a restaurant, essentially, it's hard work. I mean, you have to be in it, working in your business, but also on your business every day. So, along the way of figuring out, like, okay, well, what's the ideal franchisee candidate? Like, who does the best job running a Duck Donuts? And then finding people like them. And of course, we made mistakes. I think it was easy to, oh, you want to, you want to write a check, you love the brand, you talk about how excited you are about it, but maybe you don't have the business knowledge or the drive to work really hard to make it successful. So that's the other, I think, people piece of growing. And, then when you go international, it's very different because that franchisee was more of a business person who already had to have a structure in place. Like it was better, we realized, to find somebody who was doing it already because then they had the structure, they understood the team, they could share employees, whatever it was. But it was a very different franchisee international than it is here in the US.
Talk about the passing of the guard, the changing of the guard in a business. And here you come, not a family member, not one of the original friends co-owning this business. How did you get in the CEO spot?
Yeah, the right. I think when like I said, when I started, it was marketing and, started making headway there. And just because of one, my corporate background, and two, just the way my brain works, I started working more with the founder, Russ, who is the CEO, and, saying like, what's our strategy? What's our structure? We got to fix the people process, like just was, and he's like, he is a true entrepreneur, right? Like amazing visionary, great ideas, can get stuff started. And he would admit this, like he doesn't want to run the day to day, right? Like that wasn't his strength. So I just started working more with him and helping to build. So he obviously didn't hire me for that, right? He hired me to be the marketing girl who's going to come in and help with the brand and drive traffic. But it just, once I got exposed to a lot of that, I was like, wait a minute, I know how to do this, or I know the questions to ask or the resources to call to start building. So, I think it just became relationships, again, going back to that. And Russ had his strengths and I had mine, and we worked really well together to be
Mm.
able just to get things done and to move them along. So, again, I wasn't hired to do that, and I never thought that would be the case. But as I kept taking on more, and I was there probably about a year, and we didn't even have titles at this point. This is still very like unsophisticated structure. He's like, I'm going to promote you. And I said, oh, to what? Because I don't even know what I am. I'm the marketing person, right? And he's like, I'm going to make you COO. And I was like, well, they don't usually put marketing people over operations, right? Like that doesn't usually happen. And he's like, oh no. And again, small team, we were working very closely. I was used to
Mhm.
working very closely with ops at Hershey too. So that helped me to understand, again, the mindset, the relationships, knowing, what drives ops people crazy that marketing does and vice versa. So I kind of could be that bridge between them. So when he first said it, I was like, what? But then I was like, oh, okay, this actually does make sense. I can, handle the relationships. I can facilitate. I can connect the dots. Going back to kind of using strengths that, I think I knew I had, but sometimes you don't realize it until you're in that moment. So it just kind of kept building from there. And then, he was always very honest that he was going to take the company as far as he could. And then at some point, he would have to bring in additional resources, cash, all that stuff, which was ultimately through private equity. But as we started going through that, and it was right during COVID where he was like, I'm giving you the reins for the most part, he's like, I'm here to support you, but like, you're killing it right now with all the craziness of COVID. And it was during that time then when we started talking about selling the company, I was like, wait a minute, we have all this positive momentum. We have a great team. We're moving forward. I don't want someone else to come in and do something totally different. So I want to be the CEO essentially was how,
Good
and
for
I remember
you.
like saying it to him and being like, oh my God, did I just say that out loud? Like that was, and he's like, well, I was hoping you would say that. Like, so, it was sort of that thing where it wasn't the intention, but because of just the path we went down and the relationship that we had, it was this thing that made really a lot of sense that seemed natural, and then obviously went through the process with the group, the private equity group and whatnot. But yeah, that was never, I don't think either one of our intentions in the beginning of the relationship, but having that exposure and kind of understanding how it worked and like what my strengths were and the value I could bring, then it just sort of made sense then at that point.
I'm hearing so many things. I'm hearing self-awareness. I'm hearing asking for what you want. And I hear this from a lot of leaders too, because timing matters. Timing can be everything. You had points along the way. I heard you talk about relationships and that it wasn't that you were just doing marketing. You had to really get to know the aspects of the business and the people in the business. And you developed all these skills
Right.
in doing that, right? And then here are all these transferable skills that you're bringing to these higher level roles.
Right.
And I think a lot of people miss that along the way. And they become really good subject matter experts at what they do, and they haven't developed that broader strategic skill set.
Sure. That makes sense. I didn't know what I knew what I was good at, but I didn't know like, oh, I'm not just a marketing person. Like I get development, I get this, but I also knew what I wasn't good at. So it was focusing on my strengths and realizing how to utilize them, but then also admitting like, okay, I need somebody who's really strong on my team who can do this because that's not my area of expertise. Like, don't make me be in the weeds. Don't make me be in like tiny little details. Don't make me put together spreadsheets, whatever it was. But it was making sure then you could find people who were complementary around you because no one's good at everything. So it's like, let's focus on our strengths and what we're good at, but then admit when you're not good at something and find the people or build the team around you who can support that.
So making sure you find the people who can complement you and knowing you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to know what you know and what you don't know so that you can have a complete team. And okay, so then tell me about private equity.
So that changes everything, right? And you hear horror stories from different organizations, different worlds. It changes the business strategy essentially, and how growth happens. So there's obviously a lot more pressure for speed and numbers, and just the approach of it is very different. And especially being founder led, right? This was Russ's baby. Like this was his idea. He created it. Like he had so much vested interest and love for this baby, which ultimately was a lot of pressure for me. And I remember saying that to him, like, okay, well, you like birthed this baby, you raised this baby, but now I feel like the foster mom, like who comes in and is like trying to help take it, to the next level. So there's that from a founder perspective, which I had never worked with a founder. That was the first time. Obviously Hershey, big organization, and obviously a lot of people cared there, but it's different. It's not their baby. It's not, they can move on tomorrow and they're not going to be upset about leaving their corporate job. But, when you're the founder of a company, you have this love, and there's so much blood, sweat, tears, money, whatever it is that, he poured into this, that it's very personal. So, learning how to deal with him, I say that nicely, but
Yeah.
in the beginning, especially where it's like, oh, we're going to change this duck, or we don't like this. Like you're kind of telling him his baby's ugly, right? Like, so it was just a very different approach to go from that then to kind of more back to that corporate world where it's people who they care financially about the future cash value of the company essentially, but how you get there is very different. And especially corporate's different versus founder versus private equity. Everybody kind of has their why, that why they're in it, and how you get there. So it's been interesting to see, how all of those aspects are just very different.
What's the most challenging part of working with a founder entrepreneurs, like you said? All right, so they're very different from being in a corporate environment, and yes, it's their baby. What are the biggest parts of pushback?
Yeah, and it's funny because now, even this year, working with some other founders outside of Russ, supporting brands who are in growth mode, they're too close. And sometimes you have to just have that conversation where, well, we've always done it this way. This is how I got to this level because I've done this, whatever this is. I'm going to keep doing it. And it's like, well, okay, let's take a step back. Like, yes, that might have gotten you to here, right? But it's that
Mhm.
whole what got you here won't get you there. I forget which author says that, but it's so true. And it's easier sometimes, and we all make that mistake, right? But I think especially as a founder, we're like, well, this is what I created, this is what I did, this is what's worked for the last 10 years. Okay, that's great that worked for 10 years, got you here, but we got to change the strategy to get you to that next level. And it's being too close, and carrying a lot, as they all do, but then not being able to kind of evolve or change. So, and some of them are great. And Russ was one of them where, and in the beginning, when I didn't have as, good of a relation, I mean, I always had a good relationship, but when I didn't know him as well, I was like, oh my God, I had to tell him this is not going to work, or this is not a good idea. And it was more like nerve wracking, or more like I was more sensitive to how I delivered that or gave that feedback, or I'd come with data, whatever it was. And it's the same thing now, dealing with these different founders where I have to tread lightly, right? Like, I don't want to piss them off. I don't want to insult them. I think that's the word, is they can be very insulted with
It's
some of
very
that.
personal.
It's very personal. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, how do you get a founder entrepreneur unstuck? How do you move the needle? Because they seek you out for help with
Right.
growth, and then you have this amazing guidance to offer, and it requires change.
Right. And it's funny
What's
because
your secret to moving the needle?
I don't know if I have it completely figured out, but obviously when I'm working with someone this year, I have
Mhm.
the credibility, right? Like, they're like, "Oh, we see what you did. You have the resume to back up your recommendation." Now, am I always going to be right? Of course not. But, sometimes it's like, this is really simple. I don't know why you're not doing this. So I have that credibility, which sort of helps, but then it's the relationship and it's the delivery. It's all how you position it. And what I try to do is not make it personal. And especially if it's stuff around brand or marketing or even some ops stuff, where it doesn't really matter what I think. And it doesn't actually matter, Mr. Founder, what you think. It's what your customers want. So that's been sort of the biggest thing, where some of them will step back and be like, I'm like, I don't care that you think this is it, and I think it's that. Your customers are saying this. So it's listening to what the customers are saying, want, feedback that you're getting. I mean, they're the ultimate decision maker. And I think if founders can realize that, like, that's who their client, customer, whatever, industry they're in, it doesn't matter if you're selling a product or engineering services, like, it's all the same. You have to be able to meet your customers' expectations, and they're going to tell you.
And they're going to tell you in real time, and the data is coming in constantly.
Right,
So
right.
then, how do you know which data to take to heart? Which data to really take in and analyze and process, and which data to say this is overload, this is too much, or this is not relevant data.
Yeah, and I think especially nowadays with social media, that's very hard, because, and especially in certain industries where you're getting reviews, if you're in like retail or restaurants, where, there's Google reviews and Facebook reviews, whatever it is, or Facebook comments, you're seeing all this feedback, and you can't get hung up on like one review. If somebody says this is terrible, or I hate this, or whatever, or so I think it's just constantly asking for feedback from your customer. So, one of the things that we would focus on is like a net promoter score, and getting, research of like, how happy were you with this experience? And again, this can be in various industries. This isn't just a restaurant thing, where you're asking your customers or your clients for feedback, and, hey, what works? What doesn't? What do you love most about us? What would you change about us? And getting that feedback from clients that you value their opinion on is really important. And do it before you lose a client, right? Like, it's kind of like the exit interview. You can't do it after you've lost an employee or a client. You need to do it ongoing, so you can make those changes, so you don't have to do an exit interview. So it's getting that feedback on an ongoing basis, not just from one person or the loudest person, but then making sure you're doing it in real time on a regular basis versus after you lost an account.
And I'm glad you said this isn't just about the restaurant industry, right? Because the work that we do, so you had this growth experience with Duck Donuts, but what you did applies to whatever the business is, right? Like this is about, like you said, strategy, structure, people. It's about process and systems. And that's industry neutral.
Absolutely. It is. And the branding piece too, right? And the consistency and the experience. Again, it goes whether you're an accounting firm or, selling donuts, it's all the same approach. And I was on a panel a couple weeks ago and it was, an accounting firm, it was like a restoration, it was a nonprofit, and something else. We were all very different. I'm like, well, this is going to be interesting. And it was about sort of like customer, like sales, development, acquisition. Um,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, we were all saying the same thing. So here's an accounting firm versus, a restoration, which you only need once or twice, hopefully in your lifetime, versus a nonprofit who's just trying to get donors versus, me coming from like the restaurant retail experience. But at the end of the day, we were all saying the same thing of how to grow and how to increase your sales. So it's really is very neutral. The terminology may change, whether it's a client or an account or a customer, it's all that is different, but how you grow your business is all very much the same approach at the end of the day.
Okay, so you probably have made a mistake or two.
No.
Everybody's
Never.
perfect, right? Everyone thinks it's all perfect. Everything's, oh my God, you grew.
Yeah.
Business is huge, booming. There are so many mistakes we make along the way. What, first of all, what does it feel like in those moments? And what do you do in the wake of those mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, a gazillion mistakes, right, through my 25 whatever year career, whether it was at Hershey or Duck or in between. So, I think sometimes it's kind of taken a pause, at least for a few minutes, and realize like, how did this happen? Could I have handled this differently or made a different decision depending on the mistake? Or maybe I didn't make any decision, and that's how we ended up in this position. But I think that happens sometimes too, where you don't make a decision and then it ended up being a mistake. So, I think sometimes it's just taking a pause to reflect, to realize, could I have handled that differently? Did I not hold somebody accountable? Whatever it is, just to kind of understand how it happened. But then you got to move forward, right? And I think sometimes we get really stuck on our mistakes, or we dwell on it, or like, beat ourselves up on it. And that's not productive. So it's certainly kind of having that postmortem of, okay, can I do something different? Could I have avoided this? Or it is what it is. Like sometimes stuff's just going to happen. But then it's figuring out if you can fix it or adjust it and then just move forward. Like you gotta move on. You gotta forget about it. You can't have that be something hanging over your head. Hopefully it's not something that's so dramatic that it has to hang over your head because it has major repercussions. But a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it's just like, oh crap, okay, let's move on. We can fix this, or it's not really that big of a deal. But I think it's just kind of evaluating, how do you make sure it doesn't happen again? Was there other alternatives? But then moving on and giving yourself some grace.
Well, what is something that you're most proud of from your time? Let's start with your time at Duck. What's something you're most proud of?
I think, and I would say this to the team all the time, we had the opportunity to be part of building something. Again, coming from a big corporate world where you weren't really sure what kind of impact am I making? If I leave tomorrow, does anyone care? That type of thing, to being at this brand who everybody who was there, no matter what your position is or was, you can help grow it and impact it and hopefully make this long lasting legacy of this brand. They can say, hey, I was there. It was very, very mom and pop, very unsophisticated, and we scaled it very well, to that 200 number level, and obviously hopefully the continued growth. But I think that was probably, maybe not, but like a once in a lifetime career opportunity for a lot of us who were there during that time, or still there now, because that's just different to be part of that and work for a founder, going back to like, wanting Russ to be thrilled with where the organization was headed or going. So
Mm.
and that whole opening in other countries it's amazing to open a location anywhere. I loved going to any of the shop openings in the US, but taking a country to, or taking a brand to another country was just a very wild experience. Like, just to see this passion and excitement. You're like, you didn't even know this existed a couple months ago, but now here we are, and you love American brands, and there's a line out the door. That was a pretty cool experience from a brand building perspective.
Okay, so we get to January 2025,
Yes.
and you make a very bold move to launch your own brand, your own business.
Yes. I can't believe it's still 2025.
I know.
I know. Actually, this
Yeah.
year has flown by. I actually think this year, I feel like January wasn't that long ago. So yeah, so January I left Duck and decided to do my own thing. And, kind of when I first left, it's like, where am I going? What am I doing? And just, I realized what I like to do and where I thought I added value is helping brands grow. Like that's basically the gist of it. And, going back to that strategy, structure, people, process, learning a lot through that time. But working with brands who are in growth mode, there's a lot of growing pains. It's inevitable. There's going to be growing pains. So if I can help remove some of that and get rid of some of those roadblocks doing it again, that's where I think I can add the most value. So talk about being scrappy. I've been at a whole new level of being scrappy because I am a department of one.
Yeah.
So everything from, well, and I also launched a podcast. So everything from being the IT person of like, why is my mic not working? Setting up a website to figuring out how to do email, accounting. Like I have to bill people. I have to do that myself. I can't just tell the accounting department to, send invoices. I've literally had to learn to do everything and get super scrappy and be super in the weeds and try to stay focused, right? And be a salesperson, be a relationships person. So this year has been like really exciting and awesome, but also a whole other level of difficulty because I'm my only employee is Canva to do and ChatGPT, right? Like that's who I got. I got ChatGPT and Canva to be my assistants. And my 17-year-old daughter helps me out on some stuff in social, and I have somebody who helps me with the podcast stuff. But like consulting wise, like I'm on my own. Like and
Yeah.
it's weird. I'll write something. I'm like, can somebody proof this? Oh yeah, maybe my 17-year-old will proof it for me. But it is a wild change of not having a team.
Yeah. What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of not growing, right? Like it's been a couple months of being in this role or this company, and I've kind of fine-tuned, who I am and what I want to be and where I can add value. And some stuff has come to a head that I wasn't planning on, like, oh, you have this podcast where you talk about women and you're focused on women in leadership. Well, there's this natural connection of doing whether it's workshops or whatever it is around women in leadership. Like, being a CEO of a franchise restaurant company, I was like in the small minority of women CEOs. So there's a lot of lessons learned there from a leadership perspective. And, that's the reason why I even started the podcast was to wanted to there's not enough positive voices out there talking about women in leadership, the struggles that we have and the fact that we kind of suck at supporting each other. So how do we focus on those things that women struggle with confidence and image and exposure and all of that, but then also like, could we please support each other? Like that would be really great. So
Right.
focus on
And tell everyone the name of the podcast.
it's Loud and Lifted.
Okay, so yeah, the whole one person show, and you're doing this podcast, and you have this passion for supporting and helping women. And yes, we're each other's best friends, and we're our worst enemies. What experiences have you had on either side of that coin?
It's funny, and I kind of go back to, I was just telling someone the other day, when I was in my 20s at Hershey, the VP of marketing was a woman. She was the only woman executive at the time, and male dominated. Obviously marketing is usually pretty heavy female, or at least majority.
Mhm.
So but she was the one who kind of would talk a lot about women in leadership and women not supporting each other. And at the time, I mean, I was 23, 4, like I didn't know better. I wasn't exposed to anything else, but I didn't realize that was like all planting seeds in my head at the time of, okay, we need to do this. We need to be more supportive. And then, being at Duck where our team was, I think 50-50, but every time I would go to these conferences, like the higher up you went, the less women that there were. And even when I was named CEO, I started reaching out to other CEOs within the industry. So I'm like, hey, I want, people I can call, like mentor sort of relationships, that kind of thing. And what was amazing is the men that I reached out to were super accommodating. Yep, let's jump on a call. I'll meet you for coffee at this conference. Call me anytime. Here's my number. And I did not get the same warm welcome from women in the industry, which was wild to me
Really?
because I'm like, you're already a CEO. Like, we're not in competition. But it was just really bizarre to me. It was obviously harder to find, but I didn't have that same support from women in the industry, which
That
was
makes me
wild.
sad.
Yeah. And it's funny because now there's a great movement within the restaurant industry, specifically for women in restaurant leadership, where there's actually like tangible programs and community and network. And it's, everything from, say, a manager level up. So the industry, I think, is evolving because people got involved to help make it stronger. But it's just sort of that ability that I don't know why we don't always want to support each other. And it's been at every level. And I go back to like some of the cattiness and the competitiveness I would see from peers, in different times where it was always a competition. And I can't like understand that. Like, I've never felt like I've been in competition with another
Mhm.
woman for I don't even know the job, the title, the exposure. I'm not really sure what people get hung up on, but I just think it's really important that we support each other. And I think hopefully as women continue to grow in organizations, there's more of them that then we support the people behind us essentially. And again, having two girls, the teenagers, like if I can help influence that then when they get into, the work world, that they maybe will run into that less. But I think we get so hung up on the boys club, this and the boys club that. The boys club is real. 100%
Yep.
there's a boys club. And I don't care what industry you're in, there's a boys club. But there
Again, something else that's industry neutral.
right? Yes. But you know
Mhm.
what? Good for them. They have figured out a way to support each other, to have each other's back, sometimes to a fault. There's loyalty to a fault. And I think sometimes the lack of feeling like we're not in it, it's on us. Like, it's a comfort level because it's super uncomfortable if you're in a room full of guys who are talking football and, drinking beer and whatever, like, and here you are, the one woman that's trying to like, insert herself into the
Yes.
conversation. So
And let's face it, any woman who has progressed through leadership levels in any organization has found herself in that
yes,
space
a hundred
at
percent.
one point or another.
Yeah.
Yes, we've been there.
Yeah.
And part of this, right? So you're in a space, we are in a shared space of work. It's not competitive. There is so much work to go around, more than enough work to go around. Every business, every company, every person in a leadership position needs help. And we can't do this work alone. This is another space where no, we are not competing. There's tons of stuff out there, and you do stuff that I can't or don't want to do, or I'm not good at, or, like it's just, there's so much opportunity. We need to be able to prop each other up.
Right. And the irony is like, so much of my negativity was people I was legit not competing with, right? Like, maybe if there was a job down the road that we both were applying for a CEO, like, okay, fine. But the irony is so many situations like that. But then yet, like, when I called you and was like, hey, like, I just want to pick your brain, like, you could have been like, oh, this is competition because you could have pursued it that way or you could have viewed it that way. And it's to your point, it's not, it's different and there's enough work to go around. But like, you were so open and honest and like willing to share. And so I just have to give you, kudos for that because as much as I say the negative side of like people not being supportive, you were amazing where that was maybe a little bit closer where you could have been like, she might be going after the same people I am. And you were like, let's talk, let's do this. Here's what I did. And like, you've built this great company over the last 11 years, coming from a big corporate background. So I just appreciate that you're not on the bad list. You're on the good list of
Oh,
being
thank
supportive
you.
to other women. So
Thank
that
you.
definitely has to be
Look,
acknowledged.
I consider it an honor if someone reaches out to me and says, "Can we talk?" I'm like incredibly flattered. So, um, plus you and I go way back.
No.
And daughters, yes, we have
Yeah.
daughters.
Yes.
What's your legacy? When you think about your legacy for your daughters, what does that mean to you?
Um, ooh, that's like such a big question.
Mhm.
I guess like in the most simplest form is I don't know what their profession will be in the future. Who knows? They don't have
Yep,
that quite figured out yet. But
yep.
assuming they're in some industry somewhere working, I think just leaving a better work environment for them and also there's only so much we can control in the world around us, but it's giving them the tools and the resources that they need in order to succeed. So, I think I drive them nuts sometimes because I'll talk about like pie, like let's talk about your image and your exposure. And I asked I asked my I asked my 17-year-old yesterday, they're in a district's volleyball game and she's the captain and she's a senior and she's a leader. I'm like, "So what's your what's your leadership strategy today at the game?" Like, she's like, "Are you freaking kidding me? Like, you just asked me my." Of course, I was like half serious, half joking, but I do those things to like make them think. And I think they're exposed to conversations, they're exposed to, podcast stuff or just the other women that they're around. They're exposed to way more. I mean, no disrespect to my mom. She was a teacher. So that wasn't like things that I was exposed to from a leadership and a growth and the grit and running your own business and all of those things. So I think they surprisingly, even at 17 and 14, they see that and they respect that and they appreciate that. And they thought I was super cool when I was the CEO of Duck Donuts because their friends thought it was super cool. So that's great. But how do I make them just comfortable that they can have the difficult conversations, hold people accountable, have the relationship piece, which so far so good, I think. But just give them those tools that they can be successful in whatever path that they choose.
There's so much relatability. I know when we talked previously, you described what it was like in high school for you, from that progression from high school to college to business and that scrappiness. Talk a little bit about your standardized tests, your love of standardized tests. And, like there's so much emphasis today and so much young adult anxiety around grades and test scores. And you're a testament to what relationships mean and what working hard means. So can you talk about that a little bit?
It's funny because, back to high school, I was an average student, right? Like I got A's and B's in math. I think I always got C's. I always struggled. And then, just average. I wasn't bad. It wasn't great. And then when SATs come around, of course, I don't do well in the math part. So I don't even remember at this point what my score was. But because of that, I wanted to go to Shippensburg. That was like my school. I got into other schools, but I really wanted to go to Ship. And I got accepted as a summer start student, which meant that I had to start in June when other sort of like awkward programs were starting. I had to do a summer session, make sure I didn't fail out, I guess. And I couldn't go back to campus until January after, other people probably failed out. So I was a summer start kid, which was like such a label. And I was like mortified that I had to like be home going to Hack or Penn State Harris or Penn State York. Nothing about those schools, but just the fact that I thought I was supposed to be
Right.
away at school. Like I thought I should be away at school and I'm at home with my parents, right? Like not
Right.
cool when you want to get out. But it's so funny how that definitely I think fueled me. And like I killed it in college because it wasn't just the test, right? Like it was the projects and it was the group work and it was presenting. And I found my niche with communications journalism. And I focused on what I was good at and realized like, okay, I can, get solid, a GPA. But the irony of all of that, which is so funny then, is like I would still be a little salty about the whole summer start thing every now and again. But then when I was CEO, at one point, Shippensburg had me come back and be the commencement speaker. And I was like, oh, here's the girl who had to start in the summer because her SAT scores weren't good enough, is now the commencement speaker. Like it was just so ironic to me that like, and Shippensburg has been incredibly supportive of me, different awards and having me speak at different events and just be part of their community. And they've always been, I guess, proud, which is very cool. But I just go back to like, I almost didn't go to school there because my SAT score sucked and I was a summer start kid. So
And based on my LSAT score, I would not be accepted to the place I went to law school today. And yeah, we just need the young adults to know that your test scores and your grades today do not define your ability to succeed in whatever success looks like for you, right? And
100%.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
And it's
I
funny.
almost failed my corporation's law school class. I got like the worst grade ever, and I became a corporate lawyer. So
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I went back and got my MBA for somebody who wasn't good with numbers. Like I survived to get my MBA, years after undergrad. But
Mhm.
and did it take me more work with those accounting and whatever classes, probably. But it was like, okay, that's not going to define me because I didn't do well in high school math classes. I can pull it together for college. And now, and I think even as a marketing person in the beginning, sometimes you would get, especially back in the day, I feel like this marketing has evolved and became so much more sophisticated. But marketing people would have this reputation of not being good with numbers. So kind of was fulfilling this like, oh, math numbers thing. And so that was why I went to get my MBA because I didn't want people to be like, oh, she's in marketing. She doesn't understand the P&L. She doesn't understand, revenue drivers, blah, blah, blah. So that was really my driver because then if I was sitting there, I would just, casually mention that I was getting my MBA to the accounting people or whatever it was again for that credibility. So, it pushed me outside my comfort zone and made me get better at something, right? But again, I know my strengths and I'm great at P&Ls and budgeting and all that stuff. But don't ask me to do some kind of, crazy analysis. And I still can't do algebra because, now that my kids do that, I look at that stuff and I'm like, holy crap, I don't didn't grow anything there.
No, no. Middle school and high school math is not real math. What you're describing, that professional development and the commitment to your professional development is that's the not staying and becoming this. It's one thing to be a subject matter expert. I see so many senior leaders who think because they're experts in their area, there's no real focus on professional development. And that hunger that you had to say, I want to be able to have the conversations, to know what people are talking about, to expand in other areas of business is what uh, is what I think made you more relevant, more capable, and opened up a lot of other doors for you.
Yeah, that's true. And it's funny because now that as you're saying that, and I guess it was intentional, but you don't think about it when you're doing that. But even when I've been on boards, I usually ask to be in the finance committee, like because it just gives you that exposure and that understanding. And because of course there's the finance people on those committees to understand, like, okay, how do they think? What do they say? What are they going to ask? Like it just gives you a different perspective. Like, yeah, sure, put me on a strategic planning committee. Like that's easy, right? Or easier for me. But it's sort of pushing yourself outside that comfort zone of like, okay, well, I'm going to be exposed to this. I'm going to listen to a webinar. I'm going to go to a conference and just so I understand it. I don't have to be an expert. That's not ever going to be my area of expertise, but at least having the understanding to have intelligent conversations. And again, that helps me from a CEO perspective. It helps me from a strategy perspective that I can know what questions to ask, or I know what questions are going to be asked of me, right? Like if it's a board meeting and I'm presenting back in the day, then I know what these finance guys are going to ask me in the room. So it makes you more well-rounded. You don't have to be an expert at all of it, but just to understand it and be exposed to it, I think really can only help you grow.
What do you say to everyone who says, I don't have time? I'm so busy with work and my family. You were raising young children. So, what do you say to everyone who says, I don't have time to take classes or watch a video, whatever it is?
Yeah, I think we all make choices every day, right? And it can be time for professional development. It could be time for working out, whatever it is. I think we are all guilty, myself included, of wasting time. Like check your phone, see how long you spend on social media in a week on the little Apple thing, and you'll have time. So it's just what you prioritize. And again, I think about the same thing with people who say they don't have time to work out. Okay, well, what time did you get up? Like it's we all make choices. So if you can prioritize when or how much time you're spending on that, and that means saying no sometimes to things too. So I think especially as women, we try to be all things to all people and we say yes to everything. And at some point you've got to take control of your calendar. You've got to say no. You've got to figure out like, what can I just get rid of? What can I delegate to somebody else? And what do I need to add to my calendar instead? So I think it's being intentional with how you spend your time and really looking at your calendar. And sure, we get really focused on our work calendar. What meetings do I have? Where do I have to be? But think about your social calendar or your evening calendar, just during the week. And I get it. I have kids run into, practices and volleyballs and games and all that. But you just really have to be intentional with how you spend your time. And it takes some discipline and it takes saying no to stuff and reprioritizing.
Any suggestions or thoughts you have on what businesses should be thinking about? Businesses who are scaling, businesses in growth mode. What should they be thinking about? What should they take a look at right now as indicators or anything what should they be doing, thinking about, looking at?
Yeah, I think, a lot, especially businesses who are scaling, whether you're small or large, you are just feeling like you're constantly putting out fires and trying to stay ahead. Actually, I mean, if you're trying to stay ahead, you're trying to keep your head above water, I think is honestly what happens. So you're just so in the day to day. And I think it's really important to take a step back and think about that strategic plan. And it doesn't have to be complicated. This isn't something that's, needs to be 200 pages long and has all these diagrams. It's just like, what do you want to do? And especially right now, right? Oh my gosh, we're almost in the next year. So having like, what's your plan for 2026? Let's just go 1 year at a time. And then
Mhm.
kind of chunking that back in quarters where there's, okay, this is our focus for Q1. This is our focus on Q2, and creating that accountability. I think that's the part too, where everybody just starts moving so fast. They're not holding people accountable, or the people on your team are so overwhelmed. So if you have that plan, hey, these are our 5 goals for 2026. And this is what we're doing each quarter. And this is what you're responsible for, I'm responsible for, and having some kind of KPIs against it. We tend to overcomplicate that kind of stuff. So, and I've been guilty of that too. We did that one year where I thought made this amazing strategic plan, and we got done and presented to the team, and they're like, what are we doing? It was too much. It was overwhelming. So it has to be something that you can consume, digest easily, but then it can't just go on the shelf and then you get it back out in November. It has to be something that just becomes part of your culture, your conversations, your one-on-ones, your staff meetings. It has to be actionable. And, I think the accountability piece is tough when you're busy, and again, guilty of that. So how are you holding yourself accountable? But then also if you have a team, maybe next year I'll have a team. How are you holding your team accountable for delivering on that too?
That is there was so much in there, and it's so good, but yes, the days of the 10-year strategic plan
Yeah.
are gone. Great to have a 5 to 10-year vision, yes, but like you said, it has to be something that they are talking about in their day-to-day conversations about what work is getting done and how it ties into what their goals are. How can people reach you?
LinkedIn
I
is
think
always
that's
a
what
great place.
helped me with my strategy and growth.
Thank you, thank you. LinkedIn, definitely find me on LinkedIn, or betsyham.com are the 2 best places.
Okay, and that's Betsy, Betsy Hamm, 2
Yes.
M's, Betsy Hamm. Yeah. Betsy, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your wisdom, sharing your heart, and letting us go backstage with you. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
I appreciate being here. It's great.
Until the next time.
The Leadership Backstage podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.